Coming up next, our interview with Christian McEachern, veteran in the Canadian Armed Forces.
The more injuries you have, the worse it gets. My doctor last year filled out 9 inches of paperwork, most of it redundant, overlapping. It's just nonstop. It doesn't end. It just gets worse. Figured out that basically it creates a permanent inflammation of the brain, and that a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, the chronic anxiety, tendinitis, all that kind of stuff, is actually inflammation of the brain. And the reason why we're starting to figure that out is because I started doing something called Loretto neurofeedback, which isn't zapping your brain with anything, and I don't fully understand how it works, but it's really cool. But you sit down and your brain has established neural pathways, and when you experience any type of damage to that part of your brain, it doesn't necessarily mean that your brain's going to stop working. It just rewires around the damaged area. So while I may be getting that signal in my brain still, it's now lost 20% effectiveness because it's not using the primary neuron pathways, and it's having to reroute around those areas. Sorry, my brain can stop working very easily when I start getting detailed. So the inflammation of these particular areas of the brain is why we're having these like the body regulatory issues sort of thing. So I started doing this feedback, and what it does is it detects where the brain is supposed to be working, how it's working, and through some sort of positive reinforcement, the sounds, I can't explain it, but it's basically getting your brain to repair itself.
Yeah, no, I've heard of some research in that field. How does it manifest? Is it is it through
No, you wear this
or
attachments on your head, and you sit down,
okay,
and it's a computer program, and basically works off of different frequencies that are known.
Is that something you do at home,
both.
Or
the neurofeedback
okay.
stuff I do at the office, and I've got another device that I have at home, electromagnetic field, that I wear on my brainstem for an hour a day. And the other one that's really big with that I'm finding success with, other than neurofeedback, is nutrition is huge. I've had to cut out coffee, sugar, carbohydrates. Not that I've completely done it. I mean, I have to have a cup of coffee in the morning, but I'm not drinking the full pot of coffee in the morning, so I consider that a win. But yeah, no, I've had to completely adjust. Those quick stops at McDonald's, those can put you into a 3-day Mefloquine attack, just based off of the lack of nutrition, MSG, and all the other crap that's in there. Basically, sugars and carbohydrates inflame your brain, and we're starting to find more research, not necessarily even Mefloquine related, but that a lot of these modern mental health issues that we're having are actually inflammation of the brain issues from our poor diet. But that's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. I don't know if you knew I'm been in ketosis for about 2 years.
We tried that, and both my girlfriend and I gained a lot of weight, and it didn't work.
I know a lot of people say they tried ketosis, but
we didn't get to ketosis.
They don't quite do it
Put
right.
It that way.
That's the problem. If you don't get to ketosis, you're just upping your calorie intake like crazy.
So,
but
we tried to do it by the book, but for whatever reason, my girlfriend's still cursing that diet.
Well, if you ever want to give it another
guys
try,
are finding
I can certainly give you a hand with it.
They are finding the ketosis diet awesome for these brain injuries.
Yeah, it's incredible for brain clarity and for all kinds of things. I personally lost
you're looking
pounds
good
on it. Yeah, so much more fit than I was 2 years ago.
That might be
sure.
better. That 75 pounds might be the hair that's missing, but
No, I make up for that in
Yeah,
beard.
exactly. So we are finding some success. The only problem is we're finding it on our own. I've had to fund all my own brain research. I've had to fund my own brain treatments. Um, the medical marijuana, we're having all sorts of problems with Veteran Affairs. Hands down, it is way better than any of the pills they were giving us. Does it fix everything? No, but I'll take the 80% of effectiveness with no side effects over 90% effectiveness with tons of side effects. Um,
Oh, I mean, I'm with you here, and this is a bit what this show's about. I mean, for me, the mainstream, I've got ulcerative colitis, I've got all kinds of inflammation problems, arthritis in my hip, and I've been to doctors and I've done the mainstream recommendations for years just to find myself getting
yeah,
worse all the time. And it was through programs like this that I found solutions and I got myself back to a shape that I would have been in 20 years ago. And I actually work with 20-year-olds now because I just started working at an aerial
oh,
adventure
cool.
course. And 2 years ago, I couldn't have done that. I mean, rafting was just about, I mean, sitting in a raft, I had enough experience maybe to guide my boat down the river, but to go up in the trees and do rescues and all that, I was beyond that. And within 2 years, feels like I've lost 15 years, you know. So that's why I'm doing these shows now because I want to bring the word out that there are solutions. Mainstream's still telling people to eat a balanced carb-based diet, you know, and those recommendations have gotten more people diabetic and in all kinds of health problems over the years. And you add to that, you know, trauma, life traumas and emotional traumas and things just go downhill from there. But there definitely are solutions, and you have to find what works for you.
So Veteran Affairs in Department of National Defense are still denying that mefloquine toxicity exists. They're manufacturing gout. They're, I can tell you from personal experience that it's hard enough to deal with the post-traumatic stress disorder, all that kind of stuff. But then we run into all sorts of problems with the treatment side of things because nothing works. So for 20 years, I've taken literally every pill that's been made because none of them really worked and had side effects. So you were constantly upping your dose of your medication, figuring out it doesn't work. Then you got to come off the medication, which has its withdrawal side effects. Then you got to work your way up again with the new medication. It doesn't work. Work your way down with the side effects and the withdrawals. But it's a 20-year cycle. And all these psychologists and psychiatrists are saying, come try this therapy. It's going to work. It's the newest, latest, greatest thing for post-traumatic stress disorder. And you do the treatment and you sit there and you look at your doctor and it's like, that didn't do anything. Now your doctors are blaming you for being, treatment resistant and not cooperating and not being open-minded to new concepts and all that kind of stuff, putting the onus on you as a bad person and that you're the person that's delaying your own treatment. And, hey, it turns out that we don't have, it's hard to say who's got post-traumatic stress disorder and not. So you take a guy like me who took mefloquine, saw stuff on tour. I could have post-traumatic stress disorder, and I do. But there's a difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and mefloquine toxicity. And once you understand that, it's very obvious. So, for instance, Buddy shot a bunch of gophers on my property and threw them in the garbage. And the garbage bag got into by some animals, and I had to go clean it up, and a bunch of, swollen, stinky, maggoty, dead gophers fell out of the bag. That gave me a flashback to a certain incident that happened, in my career. That is post-traumatic stress disorder. What happens with mefloquine is there's no rhyme or reason for the trigger. So the other day I was petting my horse, having a beautiful moment with my horse, nice day out, having a good day. I'm feeling good, totally relaxed. When a horse is lying down, if you can walk up and pet that horse while it's lying down, it's an ultimate show of trust for that horse because they're totally vulnerable lying down. So that's a beautiful moment, and I'm sitting there petting my horse, and next thing I know, I'm shooting my horse in the head, right? just like that. That's not a post-traumatic stress disorder triggered event. That is a mefloquine triggered event. There's no rhyme or reason for it. There's no explanation. There was no trigger. There was no nothing. But your brain on mefloquine is constantly what we call catastrophic thinking. So
Now, just to clarify for the audience, when you see all of a sudden you're shooting your horse in the head, like in your head,
it's
that's what
like a
you're
bad
doing?
movie that goes off in your head and you can't control it. So
Okay.
literally, I was one moment petting my horse, and the next, you know, not in a mean thing, but I mean, I'd put a horse. We had to put one of our client horses down months ago. So, but there was nothing to trigger the event other than, it's always an underlying thing with any animal that you own. There's going to come a day when you've got to put it down, right? I know that, but there was nothing in that moment.
But this horse, you didn't physically put
Oh no, I
down
didn't do
this
anything
horse that
to
you're talking
her,
about now. Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah, I
just
just wanted
saying
to
that in my
clarify
mind,
that. But but that's what's going through your mind.
yeah.
Oh,
So
we got cut
just
off
another
here.
example of that. I'll be driving down the road, beautiful day. I got my horses loaded, going to the mountains. I'm in a good mood. All of a sudden, my truck's in the ditch, upside down on fire, and my horses are dying, and I can't do anything about it. Shake my head, back to the blue sky in the mountains, enjoying my day. That happens hundreds of times a day to me. Watching my horses run across the field. It used to be beautiful watching my horses run across the field. Now, I'm watching them run, and all of a sudden, the bad movie in my head, a horse trips and breaks his leg in front of me. Shake my head. All of a sudden, everything's back to normal again.
Well, and would you say that's similar to those nightmare
Oh yeah,
dreams,
totally.
the original nightmare dreams of
Yeah,
Mefloquine? That it has that
yeah.
feel to it.
So it's not a hallucination or a loss of consciousness or anything like that. It's just a bad mental thought pattern that's constantly going off the
Like
rails.
a catastrophic
Yeah,
daydream.
and you have no control over it.
Okay.
And most of the time I'm pretty good about catching it early and going, why am I thinking about that? Like there's no reason for me to be thinking that. Um, so it's it's hard to explain, but for 20 years I went through a cycle where I would be feeling good, then an event would happen and I would slowly get triggered, and then I'd still be okay, but I was a little bit heightened, and then something else would happen and I got a little bit more heightened, and then I got a little bit more heightened. And after about 6 months of this happening, you almost reach this obsessive word isn't obsessive isn't probably the good word for it, but it's obsessive in the sense that we call it the Mefloquine rage, and it's you're angry at everything. And, the smallest things are set you off. Road rage, something in the house isn't put away properly, somebody made a noise you didn't like, somebody put something down differently, just whatever, stupid reasons, and then you have a big blow up. So basically, for 20 years, I've been killing relationships with people because I just get to the point where I can't deal with their shit anymore, and I blow up and tell them to screw off and see you later, you know. And I could never explain why this cycle was happening until I figured out the Mefloquine side of things. And now that I know the cycle, I can break it, right? I haven't had that same cycle, but the problem with what the Army's doing right now is pretty much every government on the planet has come out and said mefloquine is bad. The manufacturers had to put a black box warning on the drug, which is ultimately almost a death sentence for any big pharma pill that you're going to take. Word's getting out there that methylphenolarium is bad, both civilian, traveler, Peace Corps, military, you name it. It doesn't have a good reputation worldwide. And so Canada is hiding behind the Somalia inquiry with this right now. The United States is starting to move forward with mefloquine recognition. Australia is moving forward with it. They're putting in programs to identify soldiers that were exposed and suffering from mefloquine toxicity. So basically, progress is being made and lawsuits are being won. Ireland, England, Germany, Australia, the US. But Canada is still absolutely refusing to acknowledge that mefloquine is an issue because, in a sense, it all comes back to us in the Somalia affair. With that drug being licensed for wide-scale use after Somalia, it poisoned a lot of soldiers and civilians after that, and it all comes back to that botched drug trial that the Canadian Army did in Somalia.
It was a huge bag of
They
worms
had a
for him.
chance to kill this
Um,
monster in the Somalia inquiry, and they didn't. Every casualty that we've had from mefloquine after 1993, the government has blood on its hands. They have known what it would do. And the only reason they're not admitting that there's anything that this drug is doing wrong is simply because of liability and money. So you've got thousands of Canadian soldiers that have been misdiagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So for instance, I didn't really finish this point earlier, but with someone like me, there is an overlap between post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and mefloquine poisoning. There's definitely an overlap in my case of all three. But how do you explain that to the cook that never left the camp in Afghanistan, never got shot at, never had, was his most dangerous time was going from, the office to the Tim Hortons on camp? How do you explain to that guy who's got hardcore post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms who never saw a day of combat? But the Canadian Army tells him it's post-traumatic stress disorder.
yeah, I mean it's a convenient
Yeah.
diagnosis for them, and like you say, the problems with mefloquine have been recognized. I don't know how they're holding out, but judging that this is back on the table, we're doing this interview with it. I saw something on CTV a few weeks ago, so
There's
I think it
1,500
was quite
veterans
for.
set to sue the government. I'm one of the first 8 that have already filed the lawsuit for damages. They've had we submitted hundreds of testimonies to the Veteran Affairs Standing Committee on suicide 2 years ago. Um, we've been telling them for years the suicide epidemic is powered by mefloquine. It's got nothing to do with PTSD. But people aren't listening to us. The bureaucrats have their own reasons for doing things. And when they finally released the report on suicide, which everybody's concerned about suicide, not one mention of mefloquine was made in that report. Um, and yet hundreds of us had submitted testimonies based on. So can we prove that mefloquine did this? No. Do we know exactly what mefloquine did? No. All we know is that I took it, the timeline of when I took it and my symptoms and the way everything happened, it's too coincidental to ignore. And I think right now, what we've been asking for from the government is recognition so that we can start actually treating mefloquine toxicity, because the treatment for mefloquine toxicity is completely different than post-traumatic stress disorder. All those psychiatric pills they put us on actually make it worse. All the treatments that they were telling us would work actually end up creating you feel defeated after a while. You feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not responding to all these treatments? Like, is it me? Am I the problem? Am I a bad person? No, you're not. But they've been treating a gunshot wound with a throat lozenge kind of thing.
You mentioned a few treatments earlier. That's things that you found outside the mainstream. That's not things that
Everything that we're
the
doing right
government
now,
help is
the
proposing.
mefloquine guys are finding success with, we had to find on our own.
Is there anything official on treatment for
Nothing.
mefloquine?
Just what we're telling, just what word of mouth from guys that are going through this.
Yeah. Is there any brain scans? Because
Well,
it seems
so
to me
here's,
that causes quite a bit of damage. It would be visible on brain scan. That would be your proof right there. If because PTSD doesn't cause
well,
brain
there has
damage,
been
physical
some,
brain damage itself.
they have shown some evidence that severe PTSD has similar effects to the brain as a traumatic brain injury. There is some definite things going on neurologically, physically with post-traumatic stress disorder. My MRI came back fine, but when I did a QEEG, which is basically a brain scan of your electrical brain waves, it came back that I had an undiagnosed traumatic brain injury from the military. And it also came back with inflammation of the hippocampus and dorsal vagal nerve, which are the two areas known to be affected by Mefloquine. So essentially, frontline medical staff can't detect it. It's got to be done through a neurology-based brain scan. Now, I've been telling my
And it
family
manifests
doctor,
mainly as
I've been
inflammation.
telling my family doctor for 3 years about these symptoms. He knows I'm not the only one. He knows my history with the pills and unsuccessful therapies. He knows that I found success with the brain injury treatment stuff with neurofeedback and the nutrition, which suggests it's not post-traumatic stress disorder. But he's actually gone and blamed my mefloquine toxicity symptoms on my medical cannabis. So I've been trying to get into a neurologist for 3 years, and I can't get into a neurologist because my doctor doesn't believe me.
Wow.
So I just found this out through my psychologist. I had my psychologist call him because I told him, I said, I don't think my doctor's taking me seriously. Like, this is guys that are getting taken seriously are getting sent to top clinics in Canada for diagnosis. I've been doing this a couple of years longer than some of those other guys, and I still don't have that appointment to a neurologist. And I'm having seizures. I blacked out on the phone to Veteran Affairs the other day trying to explain something to them. They're a bunch of assholes. And I got so stressed out, I woke up on the floor in a pile of drool with my dog barking at me, and I didn't know where I was. I spend most of my time in my psychologist actually talking about how to deal with the fuckery from Veteran Affairs. And I use that word very specifically. So, truth be told, the Canadian government's who's killing the soldiers in Canada now. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's forcing us to have to take them to court because they won't listen to us. And the budget cuts are getting worse.
Well,
The treatment benefits are getting worse. The denials are getting worse. It took me 13 years to win my feet pension, my pension for my bad feet, even though there's evidence on my military file that my arches collapsed while I was in the infantry. And yet they told me it had nothing to do with my service. 13 years it took me to win that battle. With evidence. So.
yeah, they're quite good to sell you the tours, thinking it'll be fun and games, but they don't want to fix the problems when
And they
they come
wonder
back.
why the Canadian Army's having recruiting problems. Why would you sign the dotted line to put your life on the line to come home wounded and get treated worse than a welfare recipient? I'm ashamed to be a veteran. I've actually, all my medals are packed. I don't even associate as being a veteran anymore. I don't go to Remembrance Day. I don't wear my medals. And I was a very proud soldier at one time.
I remember you still were one when I knew you a few
But
years ago.
this attack
But
by Veteran Affairs is relentless, and it's getting worse. And the more injuries you have, the worse it gets. My doctor last year filled out 9 inches of paperwork, most of it redundant, overlapping. It's just nonstop. It doesn't end. It just gets worse. So,
don't let that put a shadow over those times you showed grace under
well, no, I
pressure.
mean,
Yeah.
I've just moved on. That's all. The Army isn't what defines me as a person anymore. My horsemanship is. What I do with my horses now is what defines me. So it's a little bit sad to pack it all away, but I mean, hey, I was ostracized for so long in the Army that I'm having a hard time turning that back on again. I should be feeling more connected with the veteran community than I have in years because I've known for a long time Mefloquine was a problem. Now I know that I'm not alone, and yet I feel more alone than I ever have. And yeah, no, I'm walking away from it. And a lot of it's because I just can't handle the constant negative feedback from hearing all the other horror stories from veterans. You know, it gets me just as angry hearing someone else's bad story as it does my own. So, you know, Facebook, I've taken myself off of every veteran site, off of everything. It doesn't mean that the stuff's not happening, but I've made a conscious decision that for my good of my own health, I need to remove myself from as much veteran as possible. And our hope with this lawsuit is that we win enough money that I never have to open up another letter from Veteran Affairs again, because they really are the ones causing the damage now. I'm not having nightmares anymore because of what I saw overseas. I'm having nightmares because of what I'm dealing with my own government. I'd rather be shot at. At least it's a fair fight.
So tell me about your life now. The
It's
horses.
awesome.
You seem to find a lot of peace in that.
Uh,
How did you transition to that
well, when I was guiding with you
from
guys, my ex-girlfriend brought a horse home to flip him, ex-racehorse that was having all sorts of problems. And I had to, he was at an acreage on the way back from the mountains, and I was in Calgary at the time, so it was my job to stop and check on him on the way home kind of thing. And I ended up developing this relationship with this horse. That led to a couple of more horses, and next thing I know, I'm working on a ranch, and you know, here I am now, and I've got, you know, 6 horses, and you know, I'm riding up in the mountains almost daily. I'm pretty isolated. I don't talk to a lot of people anymore. Pretty much my main human contacts are my girlfriend and my doctors. Um, but my life with the horses has saved my soul, definitely. Totally unexpected. Would never have dreamed in my life this is where I ended up. I actually grew up in Calgary hating everything country and western. Because you're either a ski bum or a wannabe cowboy here. So, especially in Calgary, maybe not outside of Calgary, but you know, the whole ranchman's crowd kind of thing. So for me to end up here as a horseman is a complete 180. Would never have dreamed that that's where I ended up. And yet it's been nothing but successful since I stumbled into this. Uh,
seems to fit you
yeah,
beautifully.
no, I'm a natural at it. So,
Yeah.
and the timing of it,
And after all these
I could never
years,
have been a horseman in my younger years when I was a soldier. Um, but they've been profoundly grounding, humbling. Um, it's very rewarding, satisfying. It's a lot of heartbreak too, but overall, it's been an unexpected but a most welcome life change.
seems to give you a renewed sense of identity that's long needed to move
I'm
on from.
struggling with it a little bit in the sense that I'm not working, you know, the physical injury side of things. I mean, I do a lot of work with the horses, but I can control my pace. I don't have to work for anybody. Um, so, you know, if I'm sore, I can stop kind of thing. Whereas if I'm working for somebody, I can't. Um, I think I'm stuck a little bit in a transition zone right now where I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm not really connecting with the veteran world. There's just so much anger and animosity, and veterans are eating veterans. I mean, really, it's gotten so bad that it's survival of the fittest now. Um, you know, so I've just made this conscious decision to try and move forward with the horses. But I tried starting a business with the horses, doing equine first aid and some backcountry survival stuff. But my
Yeah, I
my
remember
last two
that.
years has been hardcore Mefloquine issues, and I've been trying to get a grip on them. So basically, my focus now is I'm either riding my horses or I'm doing medical treatments, whether it's physio, neurofeedback, um, or the massage. kind of stuff to keep me going. But so I just had a sharp pain down my arm. Um, but no, things are going well. They'd be going awesome if I could take Veteran Affairs out of the equation. Unfortunately, they're the ones that send me the paycheck, so I still have to deal with them. But hopefully, we win enough money from this lawsuit that we don't need to worry about that anymore. Because essentially, what it comes down to is there may be good people in Veteran Affairs, but the bureaucracy of it's killing. You know, my case manager at the front line level is awesome, but the bosses that are making the decision above him, they all need to be fired. A whole lot of them. Veteran Affairs needs to be burnt to the ground and rebuilt again. They're not listening to the veterans. They're not listening to our files. They're not listening to our specialist doctors. I mean, every injury that we have requires a huge amount of process to go through to get diagnosed and actually recognized by Veteran Affairs to get a pension. That takes a year itself. And then now we're waiting up to 2 years for answers. So you take a guy that's, you know, at the worst place in his life. Financially, he has no money. He's totally in a rough place. Waiting, everything is based on, nothing is going to start for treatment to get that guy better until that diagnosis is recognized by Veteran Affairs. And if that process takes 3 years to do, they wonder why people are killing themselves, because they've lost all hope, right? So it's the system. You know, my massage, for instance, my massage. Okay, great. I get to go for massage every week. That's fantastic. I'm a very lucky guy. Yay. That's what everybody tells me. Well, actually, it's deep tissue massage, and I'm in tears the entire time I'm there because it hurts so bad. And I have to go every week because if I miss a week or two, my doctor basically has to start over. The massage therapist has to start over again because I've regressed back that quickly to where my injuries were without the treatment. So every 4 months, I get to go through a 2 month stoppage in my process, going through reapproval to continue the same benefits for the same treatments. But the problem is Veteran Affairs doesn't like the word chronic illness because it means they're paying for something that isn't going to get any better, right? So, you know, it just, what a mess, you know. And medical marijuana, you know, I'm on 10 grams a day. I don't actually smoke 10 grams a day. Sometimes it's 5 grams, sometimes it's 7, some days it's 3, right? But on the really bad days, if I don't have it, I don't have it. So we keep the dosage a little bit higher. Now, do I end up with a little bit of extra at the end of the month? Sure I do. And you know what I do with that extra? I stockpile it for when Veteran Affairs is going to cut my medical marijuana and I'm 3 weeks out with nothing. So, you know, a lot of the issues that Veteran Affairs says, for instance, we're spending too much money on medical marijuana. Well, maybe if you didn't screw us around with our prescriptions and expect us to go 3 weeks without it, maybe we wouldn't need as high of prescriptions if we could get it, you know, as easily as the SSRIs from the drugstore kind of thing. Here's the other thing. My pills cost me $170 a day. My medical marijuana costs $85 a day. Not only is my medical marijuana cheaper, but I haven't had to go through as much physio because the CBD stuff actually works for chronic pain control. And I haven't had to use my cane since I started medical marijuana. So I haven't had to go for as much physio. I haven't had to use as much medication. Overall, I'm feeling better. And yet Veteran Affairs keeps cutting our medical marijuana back like we're a bunch of heroin users. You know, I'd rather die than go back on pills. And I'm not the only one.
No, I know you're not.
So I won't even take an
And
aspirin now.
when you read the list of side effects of those pills compared to marijuana, there's no comparison. So
So,
keep me posted on what happens with the lawsuit or anything
yeah,
else. I love seeing those footage of horse riding on Facebook. So don't give up all your despite everything and whatever identity you give yourself. You're an inspiration. Somebody who hasn't have to come back up from something hard. It's easy to look strong and be good, but when you've been beat up in life and you stand back up, I think that's when you can truly be an
Well,
inspiration.
thank you.
So
We're
thank you
we're
for
we're
pushing.
pioneering the treatment right now. We're figuring out what's working. So we just need the government to listen to us so we can move forward. Because right now, guys are dying and they don't need to be. It's got nothing to do with post-traumatic stress disorder. So, anyways, thanks for the time and good luck
Thank you.
with your edit. Look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Have a good night.